G'day everybody, we're just going to have a look at Essendon'S best 23 for 2025, what I consider to be their best 23. So we're going to get right into it and start in the back line. In the back pocket, we've got Andrew McGrath, 26 years old, been in the system for a few years now. Probably cops a bit more criticism than he deserves. I think it's because he was a number one draft pick, and with the number one draft pick is the expectation that the player is going to be the best player in the competition. He's not going to be that, but he does rank above average in most categories. He averaged 85 ranking points per game last year, which for a defender is pretty good. And he's basically, a pretty consistent player. And he will slot into the back line, no worries there in the back pocket. At full back, we have Ben Mackay. Ben is 26 years old. We got him from North Melbourne, obviously. Last season, he started really strongly and was really good in the first half of the year. And just like the team, his output diminished in the second half of the season. He probably didn't have quite as good a season as what people think. He only had 54 ranking points per game. And the only meaningful category he ranks above average in is intercept marks. But with another year in the system, I think he's going to be better next year. He's sort of coming into his peak as a footballer at the age of 26. So we'll see how he goes. I'd always like to see, and this is probably a bit of a unique opinion, if things aren't going so well, like last year when Peter Wright was struggling and Langford was struggling at the end of the year and couldn't kick any goals. He's a big-bodied player. You can throw him down into the forward line for, not permanently, but for a half or a quarter. See how he goes. His twin brother's a pretty good forward, obviously. He's a good mark, and he's a reasonable kick. So horses for courses. If the team's struggling, throw the players around a bit. I wouldn't mind to see him down there. And look, I know we've got enough tall players down in the forward line anyway, permanently. But just as a case of, well, if things aren't working, and why just let it go when things aren't working? I'd like to see him thrown down there as a bit of a change occasionally. But obviously, his more permanent position will be in the back line as a key position player. Next up, to complete the last line of defence, I've got Archie Roberts. Now, Archie Roberts only played the 4 games last year, averaged 85 ranking points a game, which is above average, averaged 22 disposals a game in 12 kicks a game. So he showed a lot of promise in 4 games. Any player that I think who makes a debut, the first thing I look for is, can they get the ball? I even look for that even more important than their disposal. If they can't get the ball, it doesn't matter what you can do with it. And he has a knack of getting the ball. 4 games, 22 possessions a game. That's pretty good. Hopefully he can establish himself, if not as a permanent member of the team, a player that can perhaps play 15 to 20 games. I think he'll have a pretty good season. 19 years old, he'll be 20 during the year. I think he can establish himself as a pretty important member of the team in 2025. Next up, across the half-back line, we have Jordan Ridley. Jordan Ridley was injured during last year, of course. He's 26 years old and is probably, arguably, our second elite player behind Zach Merritt. He averages about 90 ranking points per game. He's elite for disposals, very good for intercept marks, right in the peak of his career. As long as he can get a good run at it without getting injured, he is, probably our best intercept player. I think he reads the play beautifully down there. He's a good kick, and at his age, 26, this really should be when he is making his mark. And injuries permitting, he will be all set for a good year in 2025. Next, we have Zach Reid. Now, Zach Reid has only played 9 games, as you will all be aware. He's had a horrible run with injury. This guy, recruited as a key defender, 202 centimetres tall, 22 years old. So he's mature now. He's right. As long as he can get a good run at it, and he's not injured at the moment, touch wood. And, we haven't really got a whole lot of exposed form with him, obviously, not at the elite level anyway. But as a key defender, he's very, very important for us down there. And let's hope that he can establish himself in one of the key positions without getting injured.
And now he's injured.
In 2025. Across half-back, we have Mason Redman. Mason Redman had an interesting year last year. His output was down, I felt, a little bit from the year before. Maybe that was because Ben Mackay came into the team, maybe threw out his role a little bit. We're not quite sure. maybe it's because he signed a contract, and often sometimes when you sign a contract, you then your output tends to go down. It shouldn't, but just speculating, of course, we don't really know. But I would like to see some improvement from him this year and revert back to his 2023 form. He was a little bit down last year. He's above average in disposals, kicks, and he's a pretty good running player, just a very reliable player. 27 years old, right at the peak of his career.
Because he's a runner. A what?
Averages about 85 ranking points per game. He'll be a key component of the backline, running out and pumping that ball forward during 2025. And he rounds out the last of the 6 defenders. So moving on to the first wing position now, we should go through the centre line. We've got Xavier Dersma. So Dersma's 24 years old, from Port Adelaide. He's been a reasonable player for us, injured a little bit during the year, played the 15 games last year. Looks pretty good on the wing as a player. I like how he goes in hard for the ball. I think he's a bit of a heart and soul player. And I think he's definitely at his best. He's definitely a member of the starting 18. He ranks average in most categories, disposals, kicks, handballs, those sort of things. But just in the peak of his career at 24 years old, an important player. Those players in that age group are the players you actually rely upon. So at the age of 24, he would be wanting to make a mark now and really establishing himself at Essendon. As we go into the middle of the ground now, in the centre, we've got Darcy Parish. Now, this is the most important season in Parish's career, I think. He signed that big contract and then didn't really perform last year. He was injured at the start of the year, and he's the type of player that needs a few games just to get into the swing of it. He's normally at his best after he's played 2 or 3 games, and then he sort of can explode for a big 30-plus possession game. We saw when he had a consistent year in 2021, he polled 26 votes in the Brownlow medal and averaged about 32 possessions a game. I think he's a natural centreman. He's not quick, but he knows how to find the ball.
You need to perform.
And after a injury-riddled last season, this is a very, very important season for Parish. You could argue he's our second best midfielder behind Merritt. And, if he can, establish that form that he showed a couple of years ago, that will go a long way to us performing well next year. On the other wing, we've got Nick Martin. Now, I think Nick Martin needs to also spend time forward. He's one of those players, he was thrown forward last year, and every time he went forward, he kicked goals. So I'd say to myself, well, why don't I just leave him forward, or at least have him in the front half of the ground, anywhere from the wing forward. So even though I've got him on the wing here, I think he'll be pushing forward. He just knows how to kick a goal when he goes forward. He's an invaluable player.
He's very talented.
He's an elite player. Averages 28 disposals a game. Elite for disposals, elite for handballs. And, at 23 years old, he's entering the prime of his career. Averages 107 ranking points per game. With him, Merritt, and hopefully an improving Parish, we've got 3 pretty good midfield type players that can average around that 100 to 110 ranking points per game. Every aspiring club needs probably 3 players who can get that possession total up between 25 and 30. He's a good kicker of the football, knows how to kick a goal, and hopefully will be an important player for us. I've got him on the wing here, but I would also like to see him pushing forward into that forward 50 and hopefully kicking maybe 30 goals. I think that would be a really good return for him in 2025. Moving to the half forward line now, and we've got Nate Caddy, the exciting player who was picked 6 a couple of years ago, and he played the 10 games last year.
A great athlete, a super athlete by harnessing all his strength.
You can't read too much into his statistics from last year. They're always going to be a bit hit and miss, the stats from a key forward, especially a young key forward. But he shows a lot of promise. And the thing I'm most excited about with watching him is just to hopefully see him play 20 games and further his development. He's only 19. You still can't expect him to tear a game apart, but he shows that he looks like he's older than 19. He already looks like he's a couple of years older. And if he can get another 20 games into him, that's going to be really exciting to watch and see how he develops further, because he could be the type of player that within a couple of years we are basing our forward line around him. Next up, we've got Harrison Jones, 23 years old, 196 centimetres, played 21 matches last year. Played a bit as a running player last year, probably because our forward line with all our tall players was a little bit unbalanced, and I'm going to get into talking about that in a minute. He is the type of player that I think is getting better and better. These taller players always take a little bit of time, and we've seen him really start to emerge over the last 1 or 2 years. People can get impatient with these players.
Patience.
But look, it takes a long time for a player to develop their physical bulk and to be able to compete with other men. And he's at the age of 23 now, where he should be starting to establish himself, and he should be a valuable member of the team. Played, like I said, the 21 matches last year, so hopefully he can replicate that again. Across the other half forward now, we've got Kyle Langford, 28 years old. Kyle was 2 years ago put into the position where he was playing at full forward, almost as a bit of an afterthought, because Peter Wright had done his shoulder, and we threw Kyle Langford into the full forward position, and he's been a really good player there ever since. And whilst that's been good for the team and good for Kyle, that we found a player who can perform that role, I think it's unbalanced the forward line a little bit, because it's just added another tall player down there. We've already got sort of Harrison Jones, Peter Wright, Nate Caddy, and now Langford, and that's 4 sort of marking players. I know Langford is probably more of a leading player than a marking player. Those players aren't all the same, but they're all sort of full forward type players. When Langford, and if Wright didn't injure his shoulder, Langford probably wouldn't have been played down there. So even though I've got Langford here across half forward, just so the team is not that unbalanced, I'd actually like to see him move a little bit into the midfield during the year. They can even throw him down the back line. He's a very versatile player. Horses for courses, on the type of guy that likes to see players move to, if things aren't working, put him in a different position. And I just think sometimes, whilst it's been a really, really good thing having him down there, the fact that he wasn't expected to be playing at full forward 2 years ago, and because he played well there, he stayed there. It's just created a little bit of unbalance with so many tall players. So I'd like to see him sort of push out into the midfield. He's such a versatile player. He can play anywhere.
Versatility.
But look, he's the type of player that's a really good utility and will be a valuable member of the team going forward. In the first forward pocket now, we've got Isaac Kako.
I'm very excited about this.
Exciting first draft pick for us. Most people were expecting him to be a top 10 pick. He didn't quite go top 10. He may have gone top 10 if we had not used that draft strategy that we did. But we haven't had an elite small forward that can kick goals probably since Darren Buick.
My God, has it been that long?
So we can't expect too much from him in his first season. But I'd be looking, just as importantly as his goal kicking, at the defensive side of his game as well. If he can be a really high pressure defensive forward that can kick goals, and we've seen some of his highlights and he looks pretty good, he'll be a very, very important player for us. And just alluding to my earlier point that we were overstacked with tall players, that's why having him in the forward line is so important. We need that little bit of that excitement, with that bit of quickness, and a small player that can generate something out of nothing. It's probably where we were lacking last year. I felt a lot of our goals come from, and under Brad Scott, a lot of our goals have come from system rather than what I'd call chaos. And we need a few more goals from chaos and less from system. Nothing wrong with having goals from system, of course, but having a good, exciting small forward like him who can grow into the team will be really good. Now, I wouldn't expect him to play every game, obviously, but I would hope that he would be able to play more than half the games and start to establish himself in the team. Full forward, I've got Peter Wright. Yes, Peter Wright. He is, a player that does get criticised from time to time. He does seem to have hands of soap.
Dude, you gotta catch the ball.
I would like to see a bit of flexibility used with his selection as well. I mean, I thought last year it was crazy picking him for that game against Melbourne that was played in the wet. You couldn't mark anything down there. Nor would you expect him to be honest. He's sort of a one-dimensional type of player. But then you put him under the roof of the Telstra Dome, or Marvel Stadium, sorry, and he, is more than capable of, having a couple of good games where he can kick his 5 or 6 goals. He'll be quiet some games. He's just the type of player that's not going to explode for big bags of goals every week.
You are inconsistent.
But if he can play, 3 or 4 games where he kicks 5 or 6, even if he's quiet in the other games, that might be worth his spot in the team. Now, he played 14 matches last year. I wouldn't have him as an automatic selection. I would, if it's going to be wet and you're playing outdoors, I would not play him because he's the type of player that doesn't really have a role, I think, in the wet, unless he's filling in the ruck or something. But at this stage, I've still got him at full forward. Then in the other forward pocket, we have Jade Gresham. Gresham, I thought, was hot and cold last year. I think he was good enough to hold his spot in the team. But similar to Kako, we need those players that can, potentially kick a goal and create a little bit of excitement and buzz down there. So he's 27 years old. He's probably at the stage of his career where he's not going to get any better. He's at the level that he's playing at now will be the level that he will always play at. He's ranks above average for disposals for a small forward, average for kicks, and elite for handballs. He's a pretty good tackler. So, played 22 matches last year, so he really established himself as a valuable member of the team. He's not an elite player, but if he can at least hold his form and maybe even improve a little bit, hopefully, then hopefully he should be in for a reasonable year. The ruck division now, I've got Sam Draper. Now, Sam Draper is not an automatic selection for me. I still think Nick Bryan can possibly have an important role to play in this team. Draper's biggest strength is his tap work. He's a clever player. I think he's got a soccer background, and he is a kind of clever footballer. The problem is he can be a bit too clever for himself, and his football brain doesn't quite match his physical ability sometimes. He's obviously a terrible kick, and he's limited in his skills. So we've still got him at in first ruck because I think his ruck work is still important enough that he can hold down that position. But I would still consider potentially trading Draper if you can get a good deal for him. He is an Adelaide boy, I believe, and we might be able to get something for him going into the 2026 season. So this is an important season for him at 26 years of age. Ruck rover, I've got Jai Caldwell. Now, Jai Caldwell is a really, really good player, elite tackling player, and he's also such a reliable kick. If he was lining up for a goal after the siren, he's probably the one player in our team who I would pick to kick it. I just think he's just a reliable player, and he's a player that you can trust. You can't always trust every player. Jai Caldwell is a player you can trust, and I think he's just recovering from some injuries at the moment in the pre-season. Hopefully he'll be ready to go, and the emergence of him over the last year or so, he played 23 matches last year, so he played every game, I think was one of the highlights of the year. I see him as a really, really reliable player, and when he gets the ball, you just know he's going to find a teammate as well. So looking forward to a big year from Jai Caldwell. And last, we've got the skipper, Zach Merritt, our best player. What else can you say about Merritt?
You're incredibly lucky to have him.
An elite player. It's not just the fact that he, gets his 30 possessions a game and he ranks elite for, disposals, handballs, everything like that. He's also a really good tackler. He just throws himself in there. He's a really good player, and I'd love to see us just get some success just for his sake. He's obviously thrown his loyalty behind the club, and he really deserves to play finals and hopefully win a final. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that, but it'd be great to do it for him. He's such a good, loyal player, and there's no doubt that if he plays a full season, he'll be just as good in 2025 as what he's been in the last few years. So that concludes the starting 18. So we're going to move on to the interchange bench now. So the 5 players I've got on the interchange bench, I've got Sam Durham. Now, Sam Durham is probably good enough to be in the 18, but the starting 18 is kind of a meaningless term these days with the way interchange works. It's really just it's a full team effort of 22. It's not like the old days, where the interchange would, come on just at the end of the match or something. It's really just a starting 22. So Sam Durham is a versatile type of player. Great, really emerging player for us, and a really handy midfielder. So he'll be a valuable member of the team, obviously. I've got Nick Bryan as that second ruck. Archie Perkins, who I think is about to embark on the most important season of his career. He's hot and cold, Archie. He comes in and out of games, floats in and out of games, shows a bit here and there, and then you look at the stats and he's had 10 or 12 kicks and hasn't really done much, but he's a good athlete and he's got the ability to do it. I've got Dylan Shield there, even though he's getting on in age. He played pretty well last year towards the end of his career, and I think he's still going to play some valuable football for it. He's obviously great, very good footballer, a natural footballer, and as long as he's on the list, I think he should be playing in the seniors. And the last spot I've got is Elijah Sartis. So didn't quite have room there for Matt Guelfi or Ben Hobbs, but like I said, that's assuming no injuries. So that's the 5 players on the bench, which includes a sub: Sam Durham, Nick Bryan, Archie Perkins, Dylan Shield, and Elijah Sartis. What do you guys think? Would your starting 23 be any different? If you like this channel and you like the content I provide, please consider subscribing to the channel. And as always, have a great day.